There is a point when silence stops protecting you and starts killing you from the inside. And that was the point that I got to when I went to the police 23 years after the assault that I'd received had happened. Some people refer to me as brave for doing it, and I'd fully understand why people might think in that way. And I've already made a video on being brave, but I'll also add that even with that particular sentence, the concept of being brave actually insinuates that somebody has two viable options to choose between: going to the police or not going to the police. And actually, the way that I was feeling at that very time, I didn't feel like I had a choice. It was absolutely eroding me to sustain this secret any longer. And one of the things that I'm very passionate about people understanding is the cost of silence and what it does to somebody's internal emotional regularity by suppressing something so monumental. And for a long, long time, the cost of silence was smaller than the cost of speaking out. But this thing had been growing in me for so long that now it was serving to be worse for me. The cost of silence was greater than the cost of speaking out. So going to the police didn't actually feel like something that I made this quick decision to do. It was something that had been building and building and building for literally over 2 decades. For a long time, staying silent was easier until it stopped being the case. The best analogy I can come up with, it was like I was wearing this rucksack for years on end, and every year just slowly more stones are being added to this rucksack. And for a long time, my strength could carry it. I could do everything in my own power to actually feel like I was strong enough to carry this bag. But as it got so weighted, it was either take the bag off and accept however the cookie crumbled by doing so, or continue wearing the bag and literally having it drag you down until you're completely fallen over. So I opted to take the bag off. And I don't think somebody would say to somebody else, that's really brave of you to take that bag off that was basically about to make you topple over. But this post isn't really about being brave. It's about understanding how much turmoil had been building up for so long before actually going to the police at the point when I did. People often think that speaking out was the difficult part. And I'm not going to say it was easy. It was probably, no, not probably, it was the most difficult part of the entire 6 years because it was so conditioned in me not to do so. But actually, the most difficult part was trying to lead the most normal life I ever could when the thing that I was carrying and suppressing and hiding from the world was the least normal thing that anybody should ever go through. And whilst I was going through normal things that everybody does, building a career, having a normal social life, maintaining your hobbies, getting on the property market, whatever it might be for that person, almost everything I did was almost being navigated around this thing that I didn't want anybody to know about. At the point when I went to the police, the anxiety was overwhelming. I'm not going to deny that. And I just knew that this was something I had to do. But on the flip side of that, by the point that I actually went to the police, I had absolutely not a clue what I was walking into. I don't even think I could have seen that far ahead at that time. I was so consumed by this thing that I was carrying. But what I was very sure of is that anything, and I mean anything, was going to be better than what I was stomaching and carrying at that time. It wasn't something that I did lightly. This wasn't even an unconscious thought, but I even remember very vividly thinking to myself, if I don't do this, I'm actively choosing to spend the rest of my life probably in a dark place of depression, in a suppressed level of rage, and in a place that I'm probably going to have quite a miserable future. Alternatively, I step into something that is completely unknown to me, that riddles me with anxiety, but whatever that is, surely it's better than this, even though I was so unaware of what that looked like. And I honestly didn't think for a second that I was going to be taken seriously after going to the police after such a long period of time. Anything was going to be better than this. And I also remember thinking that I didn't want to go to my grave and look in the mirror and say, I didn't try. Regardless of whatever happened, whether the police reject me straight away, whether I get into court and I lose, I just didn't know. But anything was better than looking in the mirror and saying that I didn't even try. And I'm not saying this is everybody's story. I can only talk from my own personal experience. But by me maintaining my silence, he was dependent on my silence to live the life of freedom that I was basically enabling him to carry. He was dependent on my submission. And my submission effectively was implying my agreeability for him to do that to me in the first instance. Now, I understand I was a completely different person at age 16 than I was at 39 when I went to the police, but it's still a form of me saying it was okay to do that to me. What you did was technically fine because I'm not going to do anything about it. Now, I'm not saying for anybody listening to this, if you are a survivor, that therefore there's any shame in this if you don't go to it. Everybody's story is different, everybody's circumstances are different, and everybody has a different feeling about it. But I remember feeling like a suppressed level of rage that this had happened and I was enabling it by remaining silent. What it felt like at the time is that by going to the police felt like a life game of Jenga. Almost everything I did, one way or another, had been built around the secret remaining a secret. The friendship groups that I had, who were my closest friends and who knew about it and who didn't, my family not knowing and which ones. Sorry, when I say family, I mean my remaining family outside my sister. Nobody else knew until I told them. It impacted on my relationships in the workplace and what type of things I felt safe to do in the workplace. It impacted on my intimate relationships. And by going to the police, I felt like I was risking ripping out one of those blocks in a game of Jenga because everything else could just fall down and fall apart potentially by doing what I was about to do. And that was overwhelming because I put so much effort into building everything around keeping this thing a secret. For me, another part that I found completely unbearable is that I got wind of the fact that this man had been working closely with and fundraising for multiple child protection agencies. And knowing this man and what he did to me, and the fact that he had an underage relationship and then violently raped me in the way that he did, and yet I was seeing him being hailed a hero, he was being put on websites as a wonderful person, and all this money that he was making, his social media posts are being shared and on their pages. Everything about it would just literally fill me with rage when I saw it. And that got worse when I was in the justice system because I knew then that I was actually doing something about it and I was still being silenced because of the nature of what I was doing. And I used to feel embarrassed and ashamed to admit that the rage inside me when I saw this was there at all. Like it's an emotion that we shouldn't feel. It's bad to admit that you were feeling rage, but I was. And if you ask any person that has been through any form of serious sexual assault, find me one that doesn't have rage. Find me one that doesn't feel that way when their body is violated in such a violent way that they don't get this unbearable level of rage, particularly when child protection agencies are hailing this man a hero and endorsing him and complimenting him as a wonderful human being. So even the concept of going to the police for a long time was overwhelming with anxiety. But as I've already mentioned, I honestly just reached a place where I thought anything is better than this. And I guess what I'm trying to express in this is how great the cost of silence really is. And again, I can't press this point enough. I can only talk from my own experiences. I have met other survivors that have literally zero interest in ever going to the police. I've met other survivors that would if they felt safer to do so. I've met other people that they're on the cusp of it, but they're just too scared to do it. There is no shame or judgment in what anybody else chooses to do with their assault, but I'm just reporting how I handled mine and what was going through my brain and my emotions and my internal emotional regulation before being able to contain it anymore and actually making that particular final call to the police and letting it all out. So I'll just wrap up by saying that for a long, long time, I believed that silence was keeping me safe. And in many ways, it was, and it was serving a purpose. I wasn't ready for many years before coming forward. But the silence ended up being not enough. And I do understand why people think going to the police was so courageous and yeah, and it was definitely doing the right thing. But I can honestly say that I'd hit a point that I truly felt like I had nothing left to lose.